Explicit instruction really can be fun and engaging. The students have great levels of success, which I think breeds their confidence about their learning.
I use the same lesson structure in all of my lessons, so we always start with activating prior knowledge, so the kids can think about what we might have learned on the previous lesson, or even a sub-skill they might have learned a couple of terms ago that will link to the learning that we're going to do today. Then we move on to the learning intention, so the kids know exactly what they're going to learn. Then we move on to the modelled sections. That's when the teacher is talking and the students are still participating, but through checking for understanding questions. And that's where I explain exactly what they need to do to achieve success in the lesson. Which place do we always start in when we are adding using place value? We start in the ones. 5 plus 5 is 10. But do I write 10 at the bottom? No. I regroup my 10 ones into 1, 10. Now in my tens place, I have 1 plus 7 plus 5. What is that? That is 13. So I keep my 3 tens and I regroup 10 tens into 100. Now I have 100 plus 200 plus 300 is 600. So what is my final answer? 630. How many times did we regroup? We grouped 1 time, 2 times.
In the classroom, what it looks like now is it's really clear for me as a teacher what I want students to be able to do at the end of the lesson, and that way I'm able to break down the information and chunk that into sequences for students to be successful.
All right, 3-4A, we're going to do our vocabulary lesson. Each week we always learn some new vocab words from the story that we're reading, Iron Man. Okay, so let's everyone read our learning intention. We can understand and use Tier 2 words. And Tier 2 words are words that we don't often use when we're talking. We often see them in text, so books we're reading. And it's really important that we learn those words because they have some different meanings. So it's really important when we know the meaning of them, we can understand what we're reading better and use those words in our writing.
We always start off with teaching first, so introducing that concept or skill and modelling to students what it is, and using those think alouds so students can see an expert and how their thinking is happening.
All right, so we're going to get to the suffix meant. Meant. Everyone say meant. Meant. Track with me. The suffix meant means the result of an action. Okay, read with me. The suffix meant means the result of an action. Okay, I'm going to show you some examples. So in the word enjoyment is the result of enjoying something. So it's the result of enjoying something. It's the action. Okay. Placement is the result of placing something in a specific position.
So to chunk information so it's a bit more digestible for my students, memory aids definitely go a long way, especially when it's an 8-hour course. There's a lot of content we have to cover in a small amount of time. When chunking, I just really want to make sure that I'm checking for understanding along the way before I move on to the next bit of content.
Good. So with your blaster is that fluid-filled cavity or space. Remember, think about a cavity. If you have a cavity in your teeth, it's a space. So if you have a fluid-filled cavity, referring to these areas here and here, it's going to form that barrier between that trophoblast, which is going to implant, and then eventually the embryo, which becomes the baby.
So how I decide on how much time I spend teaching explicitly comes primarily from my students and their responses. Most of the lesson when I'm first teaching a concept or a skill will be me teaching explicitly because it's their first time seeing that content. As the lesson progresses, I take some of that explicit instruction away slowly, provided I have indications that my students are on board and they are on the same page with me, and that will continue for the rest until the end of the lesson, until they are able to do it independently.
On your whiteboards, can you please define extraembryonic membrane? When we use the term extraembryonic membrane, what does that mean? What am I referring to? Mentioning for me, please. Fantastic, boards down. All right, person A, could you please tell your partner, okay, when we refer to extraembryonic membranes, what does that mean? Person A, off you go. Pesha.
So during independent practice, this is not time for the teacher to sit back and relax. I feel this is where the teacher really needs to be switched on. We need to be moving around the room, checking over shoulders, checking answers. Praising students is really important so they know they're on the right track. extending students, correcting any misconceptions that may be appearing in the work that you're looking at. It's really important to make it structured as well. So you need to provide a time frame, for example. So I might be asking them to do 3 questions, and I'll say in 3 minutes we're going through the answer to question 1. So students have that maintaining accountability. They know in 3 minutes we're going to be sharing answers with partners. The teacher's going to be calling on me potentially to share those answers. And then that's another opportunity for me to check. So that's another check for understanding during independent practice. So I can go back, reteach if necessary, or I can say we've got the basics, let's extend it, let's add an example. And continuing to do that throughout independent practice to keep that work level up, because you've worked so hard throughout a lesson to keep students engaged. You've got to maintain it during the independent when you step away. These graphs will provide you with some data that you can use to further strengthen your describe and more so your explain answer, okay? That's where I'm looking for that data. So in these next answers, I'm going to be listening out for whether you have incorporated some of these statistics alongside what we discussed previously in the lesson, okay?
So during this lesson, I use during my skill development a strategy called problem pairs, where I model an example and then students do something very similar. And the reason for this is because what I was teaching them today had a lot of variations, and I wanted them to be able to apply those different variations before I showed them to another one. So in a way, it's helping scaffold this for students very explicitly, and it's modelling exactly how I want them to answer so they can refer back to that during the lesson. So we did this one last week. Let's have a go. We've got an example here. I've got 468 kilometres into hours and then metres to second. Our first step is we're going to make our kilometres to metres. All right, to make our kilometres to metres, we times by 1,000 because there are 1,000 metres in a kilometre. How many metres are in a kilometre? There are 1,000. Beautiful. So I times by 1,000, I get 468,000. I then need to convert my hours into seconds. So I need to divide it by how many seconds there are in an hour. There are 3,600 seconds in an hour. How many seconds in an hour there are? 3,600. I think I said 360 before. 3,600 is correct. So I divide that, and my final answer is 130 metres per second. Again, we've got 4, so can you guys start it with another grid? Give as many of these a go as you can. So when students are doing independent practice, or they're at a part in the skill development where it's a little bit more independent learning and I just need them to get through a couple more questions so I know that they are ready to go on to practice, I'll circulate the room while they're doing it, and it kind of gives me a little bit more data into what they're doing. So obviously with the whiteboards, I can see as a whole how they're doing as a class, but I can also watch them as I'm circulating and see what that process is like. And sometimes I find, even though their whiteboard work looks correct, their thinking process, there is some misconception there. And then that gives me an opportunity to kind of debunk that misconception before moving them on to practice. Can you guys have a go at this one? It's his favourite conditioner now. It comes in half a litre for $16.80 or 1 full litre for $35.40. Which should he buy? Convert them both into price per litres. Do you need another marker? All good? What is 500 mils a litre? How many millilitres are in a litre? That might help as well. So it's half a litre. So we've got to divide that by 0.5. Yeah, beautiful. Keep going. Yeah, so 35. Yeah, so it'd be 35.4. That would mean $35.40. So in my own classroom, when I'm using an explicit teaching approach, I find it's much easier to measure student success, but also for students to feel that success in the classroom.
Explicit instruction is a pedagogy that meets the needs of all the students in my classroom. It allows me to cater for my students who need extension and challenge, but it also makes sure that my students who need scaffolding and support are included in the lesson. And I can do that successfully using a familiar framework for all of my lessons. My students come to the lesson expecting that they're going to be successful, and that makes the whole day of school much more positive for our students. I think there are some misconceptions that explicit teaching is hard or it's boring, and I would say it's actually fun. And for me as a teacher, I feel far more successful at the end of the day because throughout my lesson, I'm checking that students are understanding and they're keeping up with me. I'm not leaving anybody behind, and I think at the end of the day, you want to know that you've done the best that you can for your students and you're bringing them along on that learning journey. And that success and that positivity breeds continued success and positivity.